I'm going to ask you one last time. Get off my yacht. Her voice sliced through the music. Sharp, cold, impossible to ignore. The hostess, tall in her sparkling heels, arms crossed, face as frosty as a forgotten glass of Prosecco, stood at the center of the deck. Around her, guests in crisp suits and flowing dresses tried not to stare, but every ear was tuned in. Phones hovered ready. He stood by the railing, one hand resting on the polished wood, the ocean gently rocking the boat beneath him. The tension was electric. The hostess took a step closer, her expensive perfume battling the salty air. I don't care what your invitation says. You don't belong here. A nervous laugh bubbled up from somewhere behind her. Glasses clinked. No one stepped in. The man she was talking to, mid-30s, black, wearing a simple navy suit, looked down at his drink, then back up at her, calm as ever. Security is coming, she snapped, signaling to a nearby waiter. Unless you want to make this uglier than it already is. He hadn't said a word. Not one. But the crowd had already made up their minds. What did they see? A threat? A mistake? Just a man in the wrong place? He wasn't loud, wasn't causing trouble, wasn't even near the VIP section. He was just there. Existing in a space he was never meant to. Let me ask you. Have you ever been in a room where every eye silently told you, you don't belong? Have you ever had to measure every breath, every move, just to avoid confirming someone else's worst assumptions? A woman in a green dress whispered, he's not even dressed for this. A man in a gray jacket checked his watch, wishing the moment would end. But the man, let's call him Marcus Reed, stood still. Waiting. Or maybe deciding. Deciding whether to walk away and disappear or to speak. And then he took a step forward, lifted his chin, and said 5 words that changed everything. But before I tell you what he said, let me take you back to the moment Marcus first stepped onto that yacht, and why the hostess, Bianca, was already watching him long before she spoke. Marcus had been on luxury yachts before. Dozens, actually. But this one was different. It wasn't the size or the lights, or the champagne chilling by the piano. It was the way people looked at him. Eyes flicking up and down, calculating. Price of shoes. Color of skin. He'd arrived just before sunset, invited by a business partner who said, "You've earned this, Marcus. Come enjoy what you built." What he built. Because 10 years ago, Marcus was washing dishes on the docks just a few piers down. Watching these same boats sail out, full of people like Bianca. People who never imagined the kid from the kitchen would end up funding 3 of the logistics firms that handled most of their overseas shipments. Funny how no one asked how he got his invitation, only whether he should have had one at all. As he climbed the steps, he noticed Bianca. Stunning dress, perfect posture. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was laughing at something until she saw him. And in that instant her whole face changed. Just a flicker, but it was there. Confusion, then dismissal, then calculation. You know that look, don't you? Like someone trying to figure out if you're here to serve or to be served. Have you ever had a stranger look at you and you just knew they'd already decided who you were? Yes, you're not alone. Marcus felt it. The shift in the air. Not open hostility but cold ownership of space. Like he'd walked through a door he wasn't supposed to fit. Still, he smiled politely, nodded, walked forward. Because tonight, he wasn't there to prove himself. He was there to observe. But what he didn't know was that Bianca had already made a silent decision. The kind that would humiliate him in front of everyone. And what she didn't know was who she was really dismissing. Have you ever been underestimated so badly it almost made you laugh? Or worse, almost made you believe them? Drop a comment if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of noise, because next, you'll see what happened when Bianca tried to erase Marcus from the guest list in front of the crowd. She held the clipboard like a weapon, sleek, silver, monogrammed. With a flourish, she flipped through the pages, eyes moving too fast to actually read. "What was your name again?" she asked, sweetly loud. He said it clearly once. She didn't write it down, just kept flipping. Behind her, 2 guests exchanged glances. One sipped their drink. The other smirked. "Oh, that's strange," Bianca murmured. "I don't seem to have you listed." The way she said it wasn't confusion. It was performance. She wanted everyone to hear. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out his invitation, embossed, formal. She didn't even touch it, just glanced at it. "That must be a mistake," she said, smile frozen. This is a private event. Perhaps you were meant to be on the service crew. Someone chuckled behind him. He heard it. A soft, sharp sound that cut deeper than any insult. And for a second, just a second, he almost believed it. Have you ever had a moment like that? Where someone says something so calmly cruel your own brain starts to betray you? He looked at the invitation again. It hadn't changed. Neither had the truth. Still, Bianca stepped to the side, half blocking the entry. I'm going to need you to step off the boat, sir. We can't have unverified guests tonight. It's a security issue. Her tone was kindness dipped in vinegar. A man nearby lifted his phone, pretending to check messages, but the camera was pointed straight at Marcus. He felt it all, the silence, the heat under his collar, the ache in his jaw from clenching. And yet he didn't move. He stood taller. Not in defiance but in memory. Because once years ago someone else had blocked the door like this. And that night had changed his life. So no, he wasn't stepping back. Not yet. Have you ever been told politely and publicly that you didn't belong? If yes, comment 1. If not, type 0. And tell me honestly. Have you ever watched someone else get shut down like that and said nothing? Because next, Bianca tries to make it worse. She calls security, raises her voice. And that was her biggest mistake. Before I tell you what happened when she raised her voice in front of the entire yacht, if stories like this grip you, hit subscribe. You'll want to see how it ends because this was the moment everything shifted. Security, she said, snapping her fingers toward the crew deck. Now that word security wasn't about safety. It was about shame. The uniformed man approached, tall, lean, unsure. The crowd hushed. Glasses paused midair. Forks hovered above plates of sea bass and truffle oil. The guard looked at Bianca, then at Marcus. He hesitated. Ma'am, is there a... I said he doesn't belong here. Bianca cut in louder. Escort him off. Now. Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch, but his hands slowly folded behind his back. A gesture not of surrender, but of control. And still no one stepped in. No one said, wait. No one asked, are you sure? One woman whispered to her date. This is so awkward. The man beside her muttered. She's doing him a favor. Cameras turned. Someone began live streaming. Another guest leaned over and said, just leave quietly, man. It's not worth it. But it was. It was always worth it. Not to win, not to humiliate, but to be seen, truly seen just once. The guard took one more step forward. He looked uncomfortable. Marcus looked him in the eye and said quietly, do you know who I am? The guard froze. His brow furrowed. Then he stepped back. Just half a step, but it was enough. And Bianca, her voice wavered. She hadn't expected the question. None of them had. And that was the first crack in the facade. Do you think most people would have walked away by now? Would you have stayed? There's no wrong answer. But next Marcus says one sentence, just one. And everyone, including Bianca, would wish they'd never pushed him that far. Don't pull that card with me, Bianca snapped. You people are always looking for a way in. Always pretending you belong. And there it was. The moment no one could take back. The air went stiff. Even the wind seemed to pause. Marcus could have said 100 things. He could have raised his voice, listed his credentials, thrown the entire yacht into chaos. But instead he just looked at her long and quiet and said, call your event manager. Tell them the investor just arrived. That sentence, you could feel the words drop like weights into the ocean. No shouting, no defense, just truth. And suddenly the room changed. Faces tensed. Someone near the buffet whispered, wait, what did he say? Another voice. Investor. Bianca stared at him. The color drained from her face, slowly like light leaving the sky. She tried to recover. I don't think. But Marcus didn't say another word. He didn't have to. Because now everyone was watching her, not him. Have you ever watched someone's power melt away one syllable at a time? Have you ever wished you could take back the way you treated someone too late? Comment one word that comes to mind in that moment. Shift. Because next the phone call happens. And when the voice on the other end speaks, it doesn't just confirm who Marcus is. It exposes who Bianca really is too. She stared at him like she hadn't heard correctly. But she had. Everyone had. Silence spread like smoke over the deck. Thin at first, then choking. She cleared her throat. lifted her phone, tapped fast, fingers twitching just slightly. "Hi, yes," she said, tone clipped. "This is Bianca from the charter event on deck 7. Pause. I have a situation. There's a man here claiming to be an investor. Says he's on the guest list. But his name doesn't appear." She flinched. Whatever the voice on the other end said, it hit hard. "Yes," she said, eyes darting. "I understand." Another pause, longer this time, and her face changed, like glass cracking beneath too much pressure. "No, I hadn't checked the updated list," she said quietly. "I assumed." Assumed. That word hung in the air like a confession. The person on the other end kept speaking, and now people were leaning in. The security guard took a subtle step back. A guest near the bar turned his full body toward them. Then Bianca slowly lowered the phone and forced a smile. Thin. Fragile. Empty. "Mr. Reed," she said, for the first time using his name. "Please forgive the mix-up. You're of course more than welcome." Now she was the one asking permission. Funny, isn't it, how fast power can switch hands? Marcus didn't say anything, just gave the smallest nod. And suddenly Bianca looked small. Not in stature but in presence. The crew stepped away. The guests whispered, but none of them were looking at Marcus now. They were watching her unravel. Have you ever seen someone try to hold their dignity with both hands and still feel it slipping? Have you ever witnessed a moment where the truth undressed someone in front of a crowd? If so, comment turn. Because next, a woman who once mocked Marcus offers him her seat. And that was only the beginning. She was still standing there, holding her empty smile like a shield. But no one was looking at her anymore. All eyes had shifted. They were on Marcus now. And not because he raised his voice, not because he made a scene, but because he didn't. He just stood there calm, composed, while the entire room rearranged itself around him. The security guard gave a quick nod and vanished into the background like a bad dream. Guests started murmuring names. His name, Reed. Wait, isn't he the one who? I read about his company. They just closed a global deal. Oh God, he's the Reed. Then the ripple effect. A woman in a red silk dress, the same one who had whispered, "He's not dressed for this," stood up from her table, smoothed her skirt, and with a smile sweet enough to rot fruit said, "Mr. Reed, please, would you like to sit here? It's the best view on the boat." He looked at the seat, looked at her and said nothing. Just smiled, polite, measured, and walked past. No bitterness, no gloating. Just a silence that said more than revenge ever could. Bianca was now alone at the center. Like a failed performance act waiting for applause that would never come. Someone nearby offered Marcus a glass of champagne. Another reached to shake his hand. And suddenly, the man who didn't belong had become the one everyone wanted to stand beside. Isn't it strange how people change when they realize you hold the keys to the room? Have you ever watched a room full of people rewrite their memories just to save face? If you've ever felt the shift, comment now, because next Marcus doesn't just reclaim space. He pulls out something from his pocket that makes every guest realize just how much power they never saw. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, slow, unbothered, like a man reaching for a handkerchief, not a hammer. And when his hand came back out, it wasn't with a phone or a contract. It was a small dark leather card case. Elegant, simple, worn at the edges. He opened it with one hand, practiced, and slid out a single black card with gold embossing. No names, just a logo. But that logo was enough. One guest, an older man near the piano, saw it and gasped audibly. That sound, tiny, involuntary, cut through the music like a cymbal crash. He leaned toward his date, whispered urgently, "That's the founding investor card." Another voice joined in, "You can't even get one of those unless you're." The whisper trailed off because now everyone knew. It wasn't just that Marcus was invited. He built the stage they were standing on. Bianca stared at the card as if it had teeth. Her lips parted then closed. She tried to recover, but her voice was threadbare now. "I wasn't aware you were affiliated on that level." He tilted his head gently. "No need to apologize," he said calmly. "You weren't expected to know." That line, it sounded kind. But everyone in the room knew exactly what it meant. She hadn't bothered to know, and that was the entire problem. Have you ever witnessed a moment so elegant, so precise, it shattered someone without a single insult? Would you rather make people remember your name, or regret forgetting it? Comment logo if you've ever seen one small detail change everything, because next one call from Marcus flips the entire event. And this time he doesn't speak quietly. He takes the mic. He didn't ask. He simply walked slow silent to the front of the yacht. The crowd parted not because he demanded it but because they knew. The music had long faded. The waves still lapped below. But even the ocean seemed quieter now. The event host, a junior coordinator holding a clipboard too big for her hands, looked up. "Do you need the mic, sir?" He nodded once. She handed it over without a word. He turned to the crowd, held the microphone like it was made of glass, not to amplify but to reveal. Then he said, "If the person in charge of tonight's guest list is in this crowd," he paused. "Let the silence fill the space. I'd like them to explain why their primary investor was nearly thrown off the boat." Gasps, not loud, just sharp inhales, scattered like fireworks without sound. And then he did it. He tapped his phone. One contact. Speaker on. A crisp, professional voice answered. "This is Evelyn Caraway, Director of Events, HarborLex Global. How can I?" "Evelyn," he said gently. "It's Marcus Reed. Just wanted you to know I'm here." Pause. Then over the loudspeaker. "Oh my God. Marcus. Yes, we saw your name checked in. Thank you for attending. The entire event was approved by your foundation. Are you enjoying the evening?" Someone dropped a glass. No one picked it up because no one moved. He looked toward Bianca, whose face had gone blank. She wasn't blinking. Evelyn continued, unaware. "We've briefed the local team that you'd have full oversight. Do let me know if there are any issues." He smiled. "No issues now, Evelyn. Thank you." Click. Silence. Not a soul spoke. He didn't look at the crowd. Didn't need to, because every person there had just heard the one thing no apology could erase. Truth, public, undeniable, and delivered with precision. Have you ever seen a lie die in front of its believers? Have you ever wished you could be that calm, that collected in the face of pure insult? If yes, type one word, Mike. Because next Bianca tries to salvage her image, but she'll learn something worse than humiliation is pity. She took a breath, shallow, shaky. I hope you understand," Bianca said, voice suddenly too high, too soft. There was never any intention to. But no one was listening anymore, because now her words sounded like what they truly were. A performance in ruins. Marcus didn't look at her. He was done with her. And somehow that was worse than if he had shouted. Much worse. The crowd, sensing the shift, began to reposition themselves. One guest, earlier bold with laughter, now sat quietly in the corner. Another man who had whispered, "He doesn't look the part," earlier turned his back entirely, as if to erase himself from the scene. And then a slow clap. One person, then another. Not wild applause, not celebration, just recognition. Recognition that a wrong had unfolded in plain sight, and that the one who was wronged had handled it with more grace than anyone deserved. Bianca still stood there, holding her now pointless clipboard, her voice reduced to breath. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Reed." He turned his head slightly. Not enough to face her, just enough to say, "Not everyone gets a second chance to make a first impression." That line, it hit harder than any public call-out, because it wasn't vengeance. It was closure. And that's the thing about dignity. It doesn't need to scream to silence a room. Have you ever watched someone lose everything, not because they were attacked but because no one believed them anymore? Have you ever felt the moment when fake smiles dissolve and only truth remains? If yes, comment clear. Because next Marcus reflects on what this night really meant. And you'll want to hear that because it's not just about class. It's about a whole system built on who's allowed. He stood quietly on the deck, the night breeze brushing past him like a soft reminder. The city lights flickered far away. But here on this yacht, the brightest light was the truth that had just been revealed. He thought about how easy it was for people to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Not with loud words or hateful acts, but with silence, with invisible lines drawn in the sand, with judgments based on skin, on clothes, on where you came from. It wasn't just about a party. It was about a system. A world built to keep some out and others in. And yet, in the midst of all that, he realized something important. Power isn't just about the cards you hold. It's about how you play them. About standing tall when the room wants you to shrink. about showing grace when they expect anger, about letting your presence rewrite the story without saying a word. Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of noise? Have you ever been judged before you spoke? If you have, you're not alone. But here's the thing. Sometimes the greatest power comes from simply being yourself, from refusing to disappear, from speaking your truth calmly, firmly, until they have no choice but to listen. So I want to ask you, next time you feel out of place or underestimated or overlooked, what will you do? Will you walk away quietly? Or will you step forward and change the entire room? Comment one word that describes how you'd respond, because the story isn't over yet. There's still one last moment, one last lesson, and that's where it gets unforgettable. Marcus took one last look at the yacht's glowing silhouette against the night sky. A world of luxury, power, and privilege. A world that almost told him he didn't belong. But he did. And so do you. Because no one gets to decide your worth. Not your skin, not your background, not the clothes you wear. You are more than what they see, more than their assumptions. And every time you choose to stand tall, to speak calmly and confidently, you remind the world that power lives within. So remember this. Never let anyone tell you where you don't belong. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up and be yourself. Thanks for staying with me till the end. If this story moved you, or if you've ever felt underestimated like Marcus Reed, drop a comment below and share your own story. And don't forget, there are many more stories like this coming soon. So hit subscribe because the next one, it's even more unbelievable.